I'd like to call the meeting of the Special Committee to review the Public Interest Disclosure Act to order. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the work of this committee and to plan for our upcoming work. I'll ask for a motion to go in camera. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, carries. Thank you both for coming. Hopefully, you have not too of a crazy day.
Right. Good morning, everyone. This is Amna Shah. I'm the MLA for Surrey City Centre and the chair of the Select Standing Committee on Private Bills and Private Members' Bills and an all-party committee of the Legislative Assembly. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the Legislative Precinct here in Victoria, which is located on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. At today's meeting, we will hear from the sponsors of two private members' bills that are committed to our committee, after which we will move in camera to deliberate. And so our first presenter is Darlene Rochford, the sponsor of Bill M202, Eligibility to Hold Public Office Act. Welcome, Darlene. As a reminder, you have up to 20 minutes to present to the committee, followed by 20 minutes for questions from committee members. Go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. Today I come forward to present Bill M202, the Eligibility to Hold Public Office Act. This legislation is a crucial step ensuring that members of the Legislative Assembly are fully dedicated to their provincial responsibilities. Specifically, this bill will prohibit MLAs from simultaneously holding elected positions in local government, such as city councils, school boards, and collecting two paychecks for two separate elected positions, commonly referred to as double dipping. This legislation is about upholding the integrity of our democratic institutions. British Columbians deserve confidence that their elected officials are fully committed to the roles that they have chosen to fulfill. They deserve assurance that MLAs are not collecting two separate taxpayer-funded salaries, that there are no conflicts of interest, and those elected to serve at the provincial level are dedicating 100% of their time and energy to addressing the pressing issues facing our province. Furthermore, the bill brings British Columbia in line with practices of other provinces while serving as MLAs is rightly recognized as a full-time commitment. When I decided to run for provincial office, I made a commitment to my municipal council that should I be elected, I would step away from my role to avoid any potential conflict of interest. I took an unpaid leave of absence, and during the election campaign and upon being elected, I officially resigned from my position on the Esquimalt Council. What surprised me, though, however, was learning that there was no legal requirement to actually do so. I was astonished to discover that an individual could serve as both an MLA and a local government representative at the same time. I was astonished to learn sitting as MLA collecting two paychecks if they wanted to for two completely separate elected positions. I think we'd be hard pressed to find a regular person on the street who thinks that this would pass the smell test. Being an MLA is not a part-time job. Since taking office, my days have been long and demanding. Like many of my colleagues in the chamber, I begin work early in the morning and often finish late in the evening. I could not possibly give my full-time attention to both provincial and municipal duties. The people of Esquimalt Colwood deserve an MLA is fully committed to advocating for them at a provincial level, just as the people of Esquimalt deserved a local representative who fully focus on their municipal concerns. This bill is not about workload, it's about transparency and accountability. Whether it's housing, policing, or any other issue where the province and local government need to negotiate, the local and provincial government representatives often have different perspectives due to different accountabilities and responsibilities. The potential for a conflict of interest is extremely likely. In fact, when this bill was presented in the House, a member was facing a potential for conflict of interest and in result could not even participate in the vote. The high potential for divided loyalties undermines the trust the people face in their elected officials and compromises the integrity of both positions. It's clear that this has to be one or the other. The majority of Canada has already addressed this issue, and this bill will catch British Columbia up with those provinces. At the moment, Esquimalt is holding a by-election to fill my former council seat. This, quite frankly, is how it should be. The people of Esquimalt deserve a local representative who is fully committed to municipal issues, just as I'm fully committed to my responsibility as their MLA in Esquimalt Colwood. This principle should apply not just in my community, but across the province. It is important to clarify that this bill applies exclusively to MLAs. We already have rules preventing an individual from serving as both an MLA and a member of parliament, and for very good reason. Public office is not something to be juggled. It requires our full-time dedication. There are numerous MLAs across the province who were holding local elected positions. They did the right thing and stepped down to be 100% focused on their work as an MLA. This bill is not about political partisanship. It's about good governance. It's about ensuring that the people of British Columbia have representatives who are singularly focused on the roles they were elected to fulfill. Again, this bill brings British Columbia in line with practices of other provinces such as Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Manitoba. That means that approximately 70% of Canadians have confidence that their provincial representatives are completely focused on the job and not collecting 2 paychecks. This legislation is about fairness, transparency, and accountability. It ensures that MLAs are fully dedicated to their provincial responsibilities and that local government representatives are equally committed to serving their communities. British Columbians, quite frankly, deserve nothing less. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you for your presentation, Darlene. And now, members, we have 20 minutes for questions from the committee, so please indicate if you wish to ask a question, and I will keep a list of speakers. Jesse?
Thank you, MLA Rochford, or MLA, for the presentation. The question I had is, you mentioned that other provinces have already implemented this kind of legislation. Could you tell us a little bit more about how many provinces and more details on that?
Oh, sorry, to make sure I wasn't muted. Right now, through our research, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Manitoba currently already have this in place.
Thank you.
Mabel?
Thank you for the presentation. In terms of your presentation with respect to the conflict of interest and also looking at how to, we've heard some arguments about folks holding different levels of office. Can you just talk about your perspective in terms of, can someone who's an MLA excuse themselves from votes, or how that would be, just address that issue in terms of being able to, dedicate themselves 100% to 2 jobs, and just some of the challenges around that with respect to your, the bill that you have introduced here.
Yeah, so are you looking for like a specific example, or just like I'll give you an example. For example, some of the local governments actually run at the same time as the legislature, just from a time perspective, let's say. Mm-hmm. So I'll pick on Victoria because I know their local government meets during the day on Mondays all day for 8 hours. When we're in session, we are here all day for 8 hours. So at some point, you are not going to be able to fill your duties, because you're going to have to make a decision on where you're spending your time. And one would hope if you're elected as an MLA, you are at the legislature doing the work that you were elected to do. That then puts you at not doing your duties as a local government official. And then depending on what's on your agenda for the day, either within the Legislative Assembly or within your local government, you may have to remove yourself to have those conversations and not be able to vote and be fully present. So I think of Bill 44 across the province. There's a lot of conversations going on within local government as well around housing in general. You cannot be, in my opinion, an MLA full-time doing the work of the province and talking about housing and the important work we're doing within the legislature, and then go back to local government, being fully transparent, unbiased opinions, and having those conversations at local government level. Does that kind of help?
Yeah.
Where you were? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And just to add to the time piece of it, I live on the South Vancouver Island, unlike some of our counterparts across the province. And there's already challenges for people coming in and making sure we're here and participating in the ledge. Trying to do that logistically, even along the other stuff, is not feasible for folks. So
thank you.
Great, thank you. Jeremy?
Thank you, member, for the thorough explanation. I'm in agreement with most of it. I will say that the two paychecks thing is less of a consideration for me. I mean, a lot of people hold two jobs, but I agree the duties are difficult. I just two specific questions on timeline. One, the first one I guess is the bill as it is pretty straightforward, fairly simple. I'm wondering if there was consideration given to the effect, the commencement date. I've had suggestions that it come into effect January 1st, which would not require the need for bylaws. But my bigger concern is setting the rules so that the next people that run for office are aware of not changing the rules in midterm, I guess. So setting the date for I guess the next municipal election so that people know what they're getting into and what the rules are. Was there consideration given to when this comes into effect?
Thank the member for the question. It was because almost everyone who was in a local elected position during the election has stepped down, to be quite frank. When we looked at the time frame, because we believed it was the right thing to do and people shouldn't be allowed to do this, most people had already done the right thing and looked at that. So because I do believe people should not be allowed to do this. So for your question in regards to it, it was in consideration.
Okay. Can I?
And just to clarify, you said bylaws, but I think you meant by-election in that question, right?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, no, I just want to clarify. I got the question right. That's okay. Thank you for the question.
Can I ask one more? And then just the other piece about the timing of all this. My sense is, and this is probably minor, but my sense is if somebody's a local councillor, spends at least 2 months running for election, gets elected, my thought, was there consideration given to a certain short grace period for them to wind down their councillor duties, discharge anything they needed to, rather than, I guess right now, as soon as the writs are returned, they are quickly disqualified, and I think that's less than 2 weeks. So just consideration to give them, I don't know, say 4 to 6 weeks to square everything away so that institutional memory isn't lost.
I would have to double check, but I believe my understanding was from the time you were elected until the time you're sworn in was the time frame, which is a couple weeks. But I would have to think about that again. But what I will say is most people, and I will speak on behalf of myself, when I knew I was going to run and there was a potential for this, I had those questions on the front end with my local elected officials. Because if you're going to run provincially and it's going to affect yourself and local government, not only do you deserve the respect for your colleagues, but your community, that you're having those conversations of what that may look like. So you should be doing that anyway. I don't think you should have to necessarily be putting that into legislation because, again, if there's consequences when you do these things, and that this should be part of that conversation anyway. Like, I guess for me, the fact, again, this wasn't even there shocked me. I just assumed at the time that if I was going to, so I prepared for it. And one would hope that anyone in that situation is doing that as well anyway.
Can I just, yeah, okay. Take your point. I think just the run up to elections is frantic, as we all know. So the ability to do that properly, and I know that as soon as you're elected, we're into various preparations. But I think just the consideration of, maybe you don't expect to get elected or don't know for sure, so you you probably prefer to spend time on getting elected than squaring away your municipal business. And then anyway, if it's 2 weeks. I thought that we're become MLAs as soon as the writs are returned, which may be 1 to 2 weeks anyway. So
it's about, it was 19th and the writ drop returns on November 6th or something like that.
Yeah,
so it's only about 2.5 weeks or 3 max.
I will add, as a candidate, for anyone who doesn't know, I only became the candidate a week before the election. So if I can do it as a local government official a week before the election, and people were elected ahead of me and weren't thinking about it, well, with you should have been.
I wouldn't count on that, but
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we'll go to the next question. Han?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. That was informative. I just have I just kind of want to follow up on Jeremy's question too. It's on the timing. So this one, how about for the current term? Is it on January 1st or you can't mention January 1st?
You mean if this was to pass?
If this passed
when
first,
would
it
it
would be
be,
for
when would
April.
it be enacted?
Immediately.
Immediately.
Okay, so they don't even, whoever that is on 2 rows right now will have to be signed immediately.
Yep.
All right. And also the second question is about by-elections. So, and that would just fall onto the responsibility of the municipal, I'm guessing.
There's already processes in place for that. So whether you won provincially, whether you get something for a different reason happens and you have to step down, that's already in place. And again, these are things that we as local government should be thinking about when we're considering running. I know I did. I knew that when I stepped down, this would happen because there was a process in place for it.
Right. But there's no legislation before that, so people who is running 2 rows might not actually know. Even though you mentioned about it's the right thing to do, but it's still it's considerable. Sometimes it's the right thing, but sometimes people might be holding 2 jobs. Have you thought about rural communities? Because I understand, for example, in my riding of Richmond, sure, there's tons of people who are running for councillor. In Vancouver, there was over 100 people running for councillor. That's not a problem. But how about rural community? There's many rural communities in the north. Actually, many people are holding 2 positions, not MLA, but 2 elected positions because there's a lack of people and communities are about 5 or 6 hours drive away. So did we look at the impact on those rural communities?
Again, it comes rural versus urban. I will say I technically am in an urban community. And during our election for 6 seats, there were still only 7 people. So I think there's different challenges no matter where you're at in the province when it comes to local government. But at the same time, this bill is not looking at that. That is a different conversation to be had. This bill is specifically looking at the fact that people cannot be an MLA and cannot hold local government.
Sorry, so my understanding is that this bill covers the entire BC. Doesn't matter if it's rural or urban MLAs.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I agree with you. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just questioning, did we look into the impact on rural communities where there's not many people running for local elected officials?
But that's not the intent of this bill. The intent of this bill is just to say you can't hold 2 positions as an MLA and as a local government official.
Yeah, I understand that. My question is that when we look at the rural communities where they do not have enough people to run for local governments or municipal government or regional governments, they just don't have the people who, once you resigned, they might not actually immediately be able to find a replacement. So do we have impact on those community, and should we look into that, the impact on those regions?
Again, the bill's pretty broad in regards to then clear. It just says you can't hold it. So there is not details within the bill. The bill is just you cannot hold 2 positions.
Okay, so I guess there's no research on the impact of rural communities. And also questioned, or sorry, can I continue questions? I think I'm asking a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have asked the question
Well,
and she's responded to.
I will switch another question, but maybe some other.
I will give Darlene the opportunity to continue responding. It seems like she may have something else for you.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it isn't the responsibility of a local politician to find the replacement in any level of government, but within local government. And this isn't how elections work, right? So at the end of the day, back to my statement that's not our job when we step down from any elected position.
So for the cost of by election, obviously right now I think this bill did not cover the cost. But there is actually in the do you look at the cost that it will trigger by election? The cost would just be offloaded to the municipal, I guess.
Similar to the question I answered for the member previously to you, there's already systems in place and something could happen outside of this that would also trigger elections. So there's a process in place for people to follow in regards to when a by-election needs to be called.
The reason I'm asking this question is because for unfunded mandate, a mandate that is offloaded by the province, which the legislature, there's actually legislature in place that the province cannot download unfunded mandate to municipalities. If we are legislated and forcing people to resign, that cost actually might have to come back to the province. Do we look into that part as well?
There's already a system in place, therefore they would follow the system as if a by-election was triggered, is my understanding.
I think it's because of their forced resigning and versus voluntary resigning. That might be a problem. People are not volunteering to resign.
Again, there is a system through municipal affairs and what triggers a by-election. There is already a system in place for that by-election. To the best of my knowledge, that is not the case. Because that system is there, that would be the case. And again, when we ran for it to be an MLA, we knew that by-elections would be triggered. Like that was a possibility, right? So for myself, I knew I was going to be resigning. My council was aware it would trigger it, the cost associated with it.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Great, thanks. Are there any further questions for Darlene?
Just one. Yeah, I think it's clear, and you've mentioned it, with respect to 70% of Canadians are covered by this legislation explicitly prohibiting an MLA to hold multiple offices, number one. And with British Columbia coming in, I think we'd be over the majority of the country. And I think that this, enacting this bill, meets the expectations of British Columbians and certainly Canadians in terms of, I would expect the rest of the country to follow suit. So, yeah, thank you. Just a comment on that.
Great, thank you. I actually have a question, Darlene. In terms of other jurisdictions, like other provinces, do you know which provinces also have this? My understanding is that there are multiple, but I'm not sure which ones.
Yeah, so Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Manitoba currently all have this in place.
Great, thank you. Are there any further questions? All right, seeing as none, thank you so much, Darlene, for your presentation. We will take a brief recess in line for our next presentation, and we'll start in just at 9:40. Thank you. thank you, members. Our next item of business is a presentation from the sponsor of Bill M204, Perinatal and Postnatal Mental Health Strategy Act, from Jody Truor. Thank you for joining us today, Jody. As a reminder, you have 20 minutes for your presentation, after which the committee will have up to 20 minutes for questions. So take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present Bill M204, the Prenatal and Postnatal Mental Health Strategy Act. This bill responds to a deep and persistent gap in our healthcare system, one that affects thousands of mothers, birthing individuals, and families across British Columbia every single year. Up to 1 in 5 women in Canada experience prenatal mental health challenges such as anxiety or depression, yet less than 15% receive evidence-based treatment. Those navigating pregnancy, childbirth, loss, or early parenthood often face mental health challenges. I bring this bill forward as a mother who has experienced these challenges firsthand. I've also listened to countless mothers and families who have shared their stories with me, stories of resilience, pain, and the search for support that was too often unavailable or out of reach. Anxiety, depression, trauma, and psychosis and grief during this period are not new, but our system has been slow to respond in BC. We face issues such as long wait times to see specialists, high costs for private care, challenges with transportation, difficult finding childcare, or even understanding where to go for help. In some communities, these are simply no prenatal mental health services available at all. Stigma continues to be a major barrier that prevents many from seeking help, while prenatal mental health challenges often affect anyone, individuals from unserved communities, including racialized, Indigenous, and immigrant parents are often disproportionate impactedly. These gaps, especially around rural and remote and northern communities, but they are present throughout the province. Without a coordinated provincial strategy, services remain patchwork, inconsistent, and inaccessible for far too many families. The need is urgent. Families are struggling today. While I want to acknowledge the work that is already underway across sectors, from healthcare providers to community organizations, we heard clearly during second reading that more must be done. I want to take this moment to sincerely thank the individuals who spoke during the debate and shared personal stories, whether their own or those of their loved ones. These were deeply emotional and important stories that were told, and I appreciate that. And that helped bring this issue into light with honesty and vulnerability. These words were not just powerful, but they were essential. I also want to take a moment to recognize how research can inform and should continue to strengthen the provincial strategy. Evidence alone is not the only solution, but is one of the most powerful tools we have to guide in decision making, especially when lives, families, and long-term outcomes are at stake. We have strong Canadian-led research that shows us what work has been done and is being done. Dr. Alana is a PhD doctor, has a Canada Research Chair of Mental Health, Associate Professor at UBC. Dr. Sarah Horn is a clinical psychologist, postdoctorate student at UBC, that really, after I presented my bill, reached out and showcased how much evidence-based research has been done and how much work they're doing, along with the Summit trial, Scaling Up Maternal Mental Health Care by Increasing Access to Treatment, is one of the largest psychotherapy studies for prenatal depression and anxiety in the world. Led by Dr. Daisy Singela, the trial addressed a key issue. While talk therapy is highly effective and preferred by most women, only 1 in 5 are able to access it due to cost, transportation, and a shortage of specialists. Summit tested scalable solutions, and findings were clear. Brief talk therapy, especially behavioral activation, can be just as effectively delivered by trained non-specialist providers such as nurses, midwives, and lie counselors, with outcomes evident to care from clinical psychologists. It also found that therapy delivered through telemedicine is just as effective as in person. So that really helps with care for women that are in those rural areas or can't leave the house because they can't drive, they have other children in the house, or even disabilities. In short, the Summit trial demonstrated that effective evidence-based care can be delivered affordability, accessibly without compromising quality. These insights directly support the kind of innovative equality models that the bill aims to provide and promote. These findings are echoed in the CAN-MAT 2025 guidelines by Dr. Simone Van God, Canada's National Clinical Guidelines for Prenatal Depression and Anxiety. They also emphasize the trauma-informed and culturally responsible care. Crucially, these highlighted scalable models like task sharing and telemedicine are not only effective, but essentially in addressing access gaps and reducing the strain on healthcare system, which we're facing right now. Together, this research provides a clear direction. Effectively, care does not need to be complex or expensive, but it must be accessible, proactive, and tailored to real-world conditions. I want to be clear, this is not about replacing professionals, it's about supporting them. In a resource environment, these scalable models can extend the reach of our healthcare system and ensure that psychologists, psychiatrists, and other specialists are able to focus on the most complex areas. This is about building capacity, not reducing it. This research points us towards what's possible, and it's time we act on that knowledge. This bill offers a meaningful step towards one informed by evidence, grounded in the compassion and focused on equality. Bill M204 lies the foundation for a provincial strategy that would be developed in a consultation with most impacted patients, care providers, and Indigenous communities and advocates. It calls for an inclusive, trauma-informed approach and ensures ongoing oversight, transparency, and accountability. Today, I'll walk you through the bill by claw and speak to intent behind each section. So I'll go through each claw and what it stands for, and we can answer any questions afterwards. Claw 1, definitions. This section provides clarity on key terms. Healthcare means anything that is done for a therapeutic, preventative, and diagnostic or other purposes related to health. Healthcare provider means a person licensed or certified or registered in British Columbia to provide healthcare. Indigenous governing body has the same meaning as Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Clause 2, development. This section is the foundation of the bill. It creates a legal obligation for the Minister of Health to develop and maintain a comprehensive strategy to improve prenatal and postnatal mental health in BC. It lays out what the strategy must contain and how often it must be reviewed. The goal is to ensure that mental health during and after pregnancy is treated with the same seriousness, structure, and provincial coordination as other areas of healthcare. Clause 2.1, the minister must develop a strategy to support prenatal and postnatal mental health in British Columbia. The intent here is to move beyond fragment or localized efforts and require a coordinated province-wide plan. This makes prenatal mental health a government priority and to ensure every region, not just a few, benefit from evidence-based services, so especially rural and northern communities. 2.2, the strategy must include measures. 2.2a, provide universal access to prenatal and postnatal mental health care. Universal access means that care is available to everyone, regardless of where they live, how much they earn, or what language they speak. This goal is for equality, not just theory, but in practice. 2.2b ensures timely access to prenatal and postnatal mental health care providers. The intent here is to reduce long wait times and connect people to help when they need it most. Timelessness is key to prevention and early intervention, which can reduce the severity and duration of symptoms. 2.2c, expand the availability of community-based prenatal and postnatal mental health care services. This clause is importance of bringing care closer to home. Community-based services are often more culturally responsible, accessible, and trusted, especially in rural or underserved regions. 2.2d, increase awareness of prenatal and postnatal mental health disorders. Many people don't recognize what they're going through as a mental health issue or they don't even know that help is available. This clause focuses on education, normalizing these experiences, and reducing stigma so people can seek help early. 2.2E, increase the availability of prenatal and postnatal mental health training for healthcare providers. The goal is to help equip the professionals who already interact with patients during and after pregnancy, such as doctors, nurses, midwives, and doulas, to identify warning signs and offer appropriate support. 2.2F, provide trauma-informed prenatal and postnatal mental health care. Trauma-informed care is critical. Many people giving birth have histories of trauma and other experiences, trauma during pregnancy, delivery, or loss. This clause ensures care providers are trained to respond with sensitivity, compassion, and safety. 2.2G, address the social determinants of prenatal and postnatal mental health. Mental health is not only shaped by biologically, it is shaped by lived realities. Poverty, housing insecurity, racism, lack of social services and support. This clause ensures those root causes are part of the strategy, not an afterthought. 2.2H, reduce barriers to accessing prenatal and postnatal mental health care. The intent is to eliminate practical challenges, high fees, no service available, no transportation, long travel distance, no childcare, language barriers. These barriers are often what stops people from getting care when they need it the most. 2.2I, combat stigma related to prenatal and postnatal mental health care. Stigma isolates people and makes them feel they're failing as parents, when in fact they're struggling with something common and treatable. This clause focuses on public education and compassion. 2.2J, promote research and data collection on prenatal and postnatal mental health care. To build better services, we need better information, who's being served, who's not, what's working, what isn't. This clause ensures the strategy is evidence-driven and responsible for changing needs over time. 2.2K, provide grief counseling for those who have experienced or are experiencing miscarriage, termination of a pregnancy, stillborn, or a death of an infant. This clause makes sure that grief and loss are recognized and supported. These experiences are incredibly painful and are often isolating. Including them in the strategy affirms that this care is not optional, it's essential. 2.3, the minister must, 2.3A, develop the strategy within 1 year after the day in which this act comes into force. A deadline ensures urgency. Without it, implementation can be delayed. 1 year is a reasonable time frame to begin this important work. 2.2B, review and update the strategy at least once every 2 years after that date. This ensures that the strategy doesn't just sit on a shelf. It must be reviewed and improved regularly in response to new data involving needs and community feedback. Clause 3, scope in developing and updating the strategy. The minister must include. This section outlines that factors that the minister must take into account when designing and updating the strategy. These indicated to ensure that the strategy is evidence-based, responsive to real conditions on the ground, and focused on areas known to directly impacted access, quality, and outcome in prenatal and postnatal mental health. It helps guide the strategy's priorities and ensures that systematic issues such as wait times, service availability, training gaps, public awareness, and social conditions are not overlooked. 3A, wait times for specialists, prenatal, postnatal mental health care services, focuses on reducing wait times for specialized mental health services during and after pregnancy, ensuring people get care when they need it most. 3B, the availability of community-based prenatal and postnatal mental health care services, the importance of having accessible, local, community-based services that meet people where they are. 3C, public awareness of prenatal and postnatal mental health care disorders, aims to access and improve public understanding of prenatal and postnatal mental health to support early recognition and reduce stigma. 3D, the availability of training programs for healthcare providers in respect of prenatal and postnatal mental health. This highlights the need to evaluate and expand training programs so that healthcare providers are equipped to address mental health concerns during and after pregnancy. 3E, the social determinant of prenatal and postnatal mental health, requires the strategy to account for broader social and economic factors such as income, housing, and systematic inequalities. This impact healthcare outcomes. Clause 4, consultation in developing and updating the strategy. The minister must consult with all of the following. This section ensures that the strategy is informed by those directly impacted, as well as professionals and experts who work on the front lines. By inquiring broader consultations, the bill guarantees that the strategy is inclusive, culturally sensitive, and responsive to real-world needs. 4A, prenatal healthcare providers, ensures that frontline professionals involved in prenatal care can provide insight into gaps in current mental health support during pregnancy. 4B, postnatal healthcare providers includes input from those providing healthcare after childbirth, who often see direct effects on postnatal mental health challenges on parents and infants. 4C, mental health care providers, involves mental health care professionals who bring clinical expertise and can help design effective, evidence-based approaches to care and treatment. 4D, individuals who have lived experiences, centers and voices of those who have personally experienced prenatal and postnatal mental health challenges to ensure the strategy reflects lived realities. 4E, Indigenous governing bodies, requires that Indigenous governing bodies to ensure the strategy respects Indigenous rights, perspectives, and culturally appropriate approaches to care. 4F, prenatal and postnatal advocate organizations engages agencies that have been working to raise awareness and push for change in this area, ensuring that their knowledge and networks are part of the solution. 4G, organizations specializing in pregnancy loss and bereavement support, brings in organizations that specialize in supporting people through miscarriages, stillborn, infant loss, ensuring grief and bereavement care is properly addressed. 4H, prescribed classes of individuals and organizations, provides flexibility by allowing the government to include additional individuals or groups through regulation, ensuring that consultation processes can evolve as needed. Clause 5, tabling upon completion of a strategy to refer to in section 2 and 3, the minister must, as soon as practicable. This section ensures that the final strategy is made public and accountable to the bill and the public. 5A, the table. The strategy of the Legislative Assembly is, if the Legislative Assembly is then in sitting, or deposit the report with the clerk of the Legislative Assembly if the Legislative Assembly is not sitting, and requires that the minister to table the strategy in the Legislative Assembly or submit it to the clerk if the Assembly is not in session, ensuring formal legislative oversight. 5B, post the strategy on a publicly accessible website maintained by on behalf of the minister. Mandates that the strategy be posted online for public access, promoting the transparency and public engagement with the strategy. Clause 6, review of Act. This section assures that the legislation is subject to formal evaluation after 5 years to assess its effectiveness and determines if amendments or improvements are needed. 6, 5 years after this act comes into force, a special committee of the Legislative Assembly is to be appointed for the purpose of reviewing this act. Requires a special committee of the Legislative Assembly to be appointed to conduct the review, embedding long-term accountability into act. Clause 7, regulations. This section provides flexibility for the government to make supporting regulations necessary for the implementation of the act. 7, the Lieutenant Governor and Council may make regulations referred to in Section 41 of Interception Act, allows the Lieutenant Governor and Council to pass regulations under the authority of Section 41 Act, enabling the Act to be adapted to practical need as they may arise. Clause. This section established that the start date of the Act. 8, this Act comes into force on the date of the royal assent, brings the Act into force immediately upon receiving royal assent, ensuring that there is no delay in beginning work on this strategy. In conclusion, Bill M204 is more than just a policy. It is a necessary step towards building a healthcare system that treats prenatal and postnatal mental health with the seriousness and support it deserves. It reflects what evidence tells us, that early intervention is effective, that scalable care models work, and that real change happens when we listen to patients, providers, and the community. By adapting this bill, we are not only supporting mothers and birthing individuals, we're strengthening families, communities, and future generations. I respectfully ask that you all support me as we move this bill forward. And I thank you for listening to all the clause, and I welcome your questions. Sorry.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation, Jody. Members, we now have 20 minutes for questions from the committee. And please indicate if you wish to ask a question, and I will keep a list of speakers. Great. Mabel, we'll start with you.
Awesome, terrific. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. And I think to your point with respect to addressing stigma and raising awareness, I think the stories that we heard and, really contributes towards across our society, I think, raising understanding in terms of just this issue, which I think for a long time is, right, we haven't become accustomed to talking about. And so really, so I just appreciated hearing those stories and, really contributing towards that. I agree with you that the, needing to address, I think, one in five mothers who struggle or deal with either peri or postnatal depression is a priority. My concern and my perspective is that my expectation is that this issue be addressed, to your point, across our healthcare system, provincial mandate, but also be integrated in terms of the service that's delivered our healthcare system. So in terms of addressing issues or challenges around depression, I know it's highly associated as well with mothers as well who have addiction issues, but notwithstanding, that's one component of it. And so that was just my reflection that, yes, we need to address to reduce the barriers, we need to raise awareness, but, in terms of moving forward in a provincially mandated, system-wide, across-the-board approach is critical, and I know that the Ministry of Health has that mandate to move forward. And so, that was just I share that, it's a pressing issue, but my expectation is that we really need to address it in the context of our healthcare system and, right across the board, training to healthcare delivery to a provincial strategy which is underway. So, that was my...
Great, thanks. Mabel, up next we have Han.
Well, thank you for your presentation. That was very informative, and I'm actually quite shocked to hear that only 1 in 5 women actually get access to the supports that they should have. And you mentioned about it's because of the cost, transportation, lack of healthcare supporters. Can you just expand on what's the current support and why is it so difficult for them to find the support that they need?
Yeah, so some of that I mentioned was some rural areas and northern communities that don't even have mental health support. So if they were seeking mental health support, they would have to travel from the rural areas. We're lucky that we're in the Lower Mainland. Some of us that live within the Lower Mainland, let's say closer to Women's Hospital or, we're able to get to UBC where there is research or trials that are going on that can get that support. But people that are in rural areas or even in some Indigenous groups or northern communities where there isn't even any mental health centers, they have a hard time with traveling. So they would have to leave their areas, travel, that's cost, factor, and then getting that support, and then as well as getting those appointments when they need them. So they would have to each time fly in or travel to come into the city to be able to get those kind of services. So that's why when I've been working with different organizations and research-based, Summit, it was one of the biggest research led in the world, and they are bringing in and show evidence that 97% women that got this care, it was evident that it was exactly the same as being in person, that they were able to get it through telemedicine. So that would cost, it would be cost effective, meaning that they would be able to stay at home, not have to travel, be within their community, and still receive that care.
Great, Jesse?
Thank you, member, for your presentation and, really bringing to light, as Mabel said, a lot of things that often go not talked about or stigmatized. And I think it's a really important conversation that we had in the House, as well as moving forward with this. The questions that I have is just speaking about the resources that are available. Were you in collaboration or have you spoken with Health or Perinatal Service BC about the programs that exist currently and what their programs are moving forward on this?
I have. So I've been in touch with, and I think a lot of them have supported and are willing to come in and give their presentations from UBC and the Summit trial, which is one of the world's biggest trials for prenatal and mental health in the world. And they have given their evidence that the gap is so major, that it's so under-serviced to mothers and families, that they have all the evidence and research available just right here at UBC, Toronto University, and I can tell you exactly who they are. And so they're the chair, so I've been in touch with the Canada Research Chair in Mental Health, and they're associated with UBC, and as well as the Summit trial, which is scaling up maternal mental health care by increasing access to treatment. They are one of the world's biggest research-led, evidence-based of where the gaps are and what needs to be done. So they're more than happy to come in and give a presentation as well of showcasing where the lack is and what services are available, but people aren't able to access them, just like how I mentioned, like the rural areas and northern communities and, Indigenous groups and even cultural sensitive. Like people don't know, they're scared because there's that language barrier or, community-based. They just don't know what kind of services that are available to them, if there is any.
No, I think that's really helpful, but I think, specifically, I was just talking about Perinatal Services BC, like the organization that works with Ministry of Health, if you know what they are already doing on.
Yes, there is. So there are services, like I said, but they're available at BC Women's. Not everybody has access to them. So they have also spoken, and so have the clinical counselors of BC. They've also showcased that the gap that's there and how, yes, there are psychologists, but the wait times are so long that these mothers then, there's like a time sensitive of when they can get that service, but if they get it after 9 months, they don't qualify for that prenatal or postnatal mental health strategy. Then they go back into the other system of having care from a psychiatrist, and the wait time might be a year, but that gap of that prenatal time that they seek or are seeking that help gets dissolved. So there is a gap where the professionals need to be involved to be able to screen, and that's why I've had those clauses that the screening process and the professionals, do this in a timely manner.
Yeah, I ask because I recognize all of those programs, but my understanding, and I would want to know if you're aware as well, is that the Minister of Health in her mandate letter has been mandated to improve services when it comes to maternity care, reproductive care, women's health, and has already undertaken working on a strategy with Prenatal Services BC to develop a refreshed maternal care strategy, which is to be implemented in the same timeline of this bill. So my question is more if you're aware of that, and then how the work that's being done there, if it's being duplicated by this bill, really.
So the work hasn't been done.
Right.
So
but
it's gonna be,
right.
So it's gonna be implemented. So the gap is already there, right? So the care hasn't been provided. That's why I brought this strategy to be able to, and I want to be able to work with every level, like the care providers, the communities, the groups that are organizations that have already been in place, to be able to get their feedback to see where the gaps are, what's been missing, what's working, and what's not working. So that's why I'd be more than happy to see what work the minister is thinking of doing. And
yeah, and I think if you haven't spoken to them about it yet, I think it would be great, because I think the work that is being done, as you said, it was in the mandate letter right now, so it's being done the same similar timeline to create a plan as as in your bill, that maybe there's work here that can be done
Yeah, we can
without
collaborate.
duplicating the work. And then the other question that I just have is obviously, this is a private member's bill, so the implications financially, we can't tie anyone's hands. So just seeing the strategy, what are your goals of the strategy, knowing that we can't have a financial aspect to the bill itself?
So there is no financial, the strategy is to work with what we have, the groups and organizations, the resources that are there, but strengthening and seeing where the gaps are. We already have, let's say, family physicians or psychiatrists or doulas or midwives. I'm not trying to create a new, service or a new, I'm just trying to strengthen what we already have and seeing that, we revamp and put mandates in place that, if a family doctor is seeing, or an OBGYN or a midwife is seeing a prenatal mother, a birthing mother, or, during the care of pregnancy or after loss, that they have training, that specializes in the field of grief or, loss or, depression and anxiety that these mothers may be having. So we're not trying to create a new, service. We're trying to strengthen what we have.
Okay, I just, looking at the language of the bill, I know it's a strategy itself, but I know when you create a strategy in order to have it have meaningful impact,
And there has been funding, so such as, I know that I spoke with the BC Clinical Counseling, there has been about $15 million that has been allotted to them that hasn't been utilized yet. So there are fundings that have already been placed, and they were like, well, we haven't been able to implement anything, which we would like to be able to see strategies such as this and use that funding into be able to, create more, let's say if it's telemedicine or, where the gaps are and how to fix those gaps. So that's something that I have been in touch with different organizations and where there is funding or where there are services that have been lacking or they just haven't implemented certain services.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important that the work we're doing, as the best work we can do efficiently and making sure we're using the resources. So again, I thank you for raising that, and that's all the questions I had.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Trevor?
Thanks for the presentation today. Just a couple quick things. One is just curious to know what the feedback's been since this has gone before the legislature. And the second thing is just in terms of consistency, right? Is that every area of the province is different. In Surrey specifically, I've talked to a number of physicians where they're seeing a number of new Canadians coming in to give birth, and so we're talking about some very challenging, language barriers that we're trying to overcome. So, and the other thing too is just the work that needs to be done with the individualized health authorities to make sure there's consistency throughout, right? And I get that every area of the province is going to be a little bit different, but the framework is, there needs to be a consistency amongst that framework throughout the health authorities. So just your comments on that.
Yeah, so that is one of the cultural sensitive, and that is something that education and cultural sensitivity, so that stigma is taken away, especially like areas, let's say, like Surrey, where there's a lot of South Asian communities. Being South Asian myself, I can tell you that it's important that you can speak in your own language and get that care and be able to express what you're going through. And there are different programs like the Ronald McDonald House. I've been speaking with care providers from there, from Surrey, and they've said that there's volunteer groups that are coming, but they'd love to be able to educate more families when they're in the hospital, letting them know that this service is available and it's free of cost. It's run by volunteers. The feedback that I've been getting, one of your other questions was, what was my response of getting this? I was actually overwhelmed with how much support I got from this bill. I had, like I said, the Summit Group, that's one of the world's biggest research-led groups by Dr. Daisy, reach out to me, who's willing to fly out from Toronto to come and present on this bill and showcase how it can be cost-effective and evidence-based, that how their trial has helped thousands of families and women and communities, not only here in North America, but they've been doing research in Uganda, Kenya, India, Pakistan, and North America. So just to showcase that the work that of evidence base and cost effective, and the gaps that are in our system. They've done a phenomenal job. I've gotten support from the Summit Group, UBC, BC Women's. I've gotten support from the clinical counselors of BC and just families in general that have reached out and shared their own personal stories, their journeys, and how they felt isolated and how they didn't get the support when they needed it the most. And how a lot of mothers, being a mother myself, and why a lot of people ask me, like, why did you bring this bill up? Like, where did you come up with this bill? It was my own struggles. I struggled from infertility first and foremost. I actually had a conversation with Jeremy on one of our walks one day. I was telling him I was a breast cancer survivor, so I was on tamoxifen, which is a drug that eventually, after you've had breast cancer, usually puts you into not having your cycle on a regular. So I had that before I got married, and that conversation of infertility was there. What am I going to do? How am I going to have children? And being women, it's something that we carry, like, oh, we're supposed to have children. It could be a cultural thing. I mean, things have changed, but it's something very personal. And so I had a very supportive husband that was like, we'll cross that path when we get there and we'll see what happens. But, I had my own journey and I ended up getting pregnant. And then 5 years later, I was able to conceive again. My first pregnancy was daunting. It was horrible. I was in the hospital for 9 months. I could not even drink water. I was on IV therapy for the full 9 months for 8 hours a day at BC Women's. And a lot of women feel isolated during that time. Like, I'd be in this hospital. My husband had to still work. I'd be in a hospital room by myself, being monitored and being like, what's going to happen? What's the outcome of this child going to be? And I'm not the only woman that might have gone through this, but millions of women have gone through this, infertility, and the journey of the pregnancy. And then birthing itself is another journey. I had to go through a challenge where I had to sign, a will. If I don't make it through this pregnancy, when I deliver this child, who gets the rights to this child? Yes, I have a husband, but I've never seen him as a father. I don't know how he's going to be, who has the rights. So I've gone through my own journey. And then aftercare, like, once you've had this child, my husband and I, we were living in Seashelt, a very small little town with about 5,000 people at that time. He was an optometrist there, and Jeremy and I were talking, and it's a very small, isolated community. I had no family nearby, and having that care of isolation is so stressful, and so you want to be a good mother. You always want to showcase of how good and perfect you are, because that's what society thinks of women to do and families. And so many women struggle on a daily, a lack of sleep, being a new mother, motherhood itself, and changing of dynamics within family are really concerning. And so my personal journey really brought me, when I was speaking to other women, and I'm a doula, and I was able to engage with other families and seek, I'm not the only one that suffered. There's thousands, and then you continue on talking, and when we bring that stigma out where we can talk about it, a lot of women suffer, a lot of families suffer. So this bill is very near and dear to me, to be able to get that strategy and be able to give people that support where they live when they need it. And I think a lot of women fall in that gap because of stigma, or without that support, or without having organizations, or letting, now more and more organizations are there, but just having that that support, that structure that we're saying, is there structure throughout, making sure that we even teach the physicians that are there, the sensitivity. If there's a male, he may not know that how this can affect a woman, like childbirth or a miscarriage, how that relates to women. Women feel like failures sometimes, and I don't think any women or families should be able to be struggling in silence, when we should be able to give that support to everyone. So.
Great, thank you. Are there any further questions? Great. I have a question and maybe a comment, if I may. So I understand that this bill is really to develop a strategy, and that's great. And I appreciate the lived experience and the story that you bring to the development of this bill and the priorities that are outlined within it. So really strategy, when we're talking about strategy, I think there is a natural recognition that there may potentially be gaps in the system. And I also understand that there is a request for a refreshed maternity strategy that has been requested from the Ministry of Health to Perinatal Services BC. And my thoughts about that are, and as you mentioned, we do have the structures in place already, and the request has been made, and as a matter of fact, my understanding is that this one-year request as well within this bill is in line with that request to Perinatal Services BC. And so given that there is that request on the table, and that Perinatal Services BC does implement strategies as well, and including the Perinatal Hub, which includes lots of resources, resources that are also requested in this bill. I think my concern is more so around the duplication of work that may already be ongoing. And when I say work that is already ongoing, I'm referring specifically to the work around the development of a strategy, because the bill is about a strategy as well. And so I was wondering if you could maybe comment on kind of these parallel strategies, I suppose, or the parallel development of strategies, and whether you think that it is problematic, not problematic, that Perinatal Services BC is also doing that work, because it is in the minister's mandate as well to ensure that this work is done. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I understand that the existing services are there, but they're not tailored or consistently available. And this bill mandates a dedicated, targeted, and measurable strategy. The strategy also uses a low-cost, scalable tools like task sharing and telemedicine, like I mentioned, for rural areas and northern communities, projected to save up to $2 billion annually by reducing system strain. So that is why I feel that this is a little bit different, and how we can collaborate. I'm more than willing to collaborate and work on strategies and the evidence that I've collected during my research to bring this bill forward. And I understand, like I said, that there are, the mandate's been there, but I can tell you where the gaps are. And I don't think that that's going to be implemented.
Okay, and just to follow up, so if I'm understanding correctly, the difference here is the difference in the types of measures for the strategy?
Correct.
I suppose. Okay. And so given that we don't know what the measures are for the strategy that has been requested by the Minister of Health to Perinatal Services BC, we may not know that at this point, but this bill is asking for different measures of a strategy. Again, it's just the word strategy that kind of makes me think, well, is there another way other than introducing another bill to work that is already being done? But nonetheless, I appreciate your answer there, and that's my question. Any further questions? I thank you so much for your time. Sorry we kept you a little bit over, but
thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and presenting my bill and the reasoning behind it and why I brought it forward. So thank you. I appreciate everybody.
Great, thank you, Jody and members. So our final agenda item today is in-camera deliberations. And I'm wondering if we can take a brief recess, 10 minutes or 5 minutes? And if the members will entertain a 5-minute recess before we get into in-camera deliberations, great. We will come back at 10:29. All right, welcome back, members. I will ask for a motion to go in camera. Moved. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The committee